So, imagine a room in Brussels, 27 European flags, one Canadian maple leaf, one empty chair. This is the signing ceremony for the Atlantic-Arctic Defense Compact, the largest defense partnership since the founding of NATO in 1945. It is not a protest. It is not a temporary measure. It is not a negotiating tactic designed to pressure Washington. It is a permanent structural realignment of European defense, a departure from 80 years of American leadership. The United States was not invited. The United States was not consulted. The United States discovered the final terms from press coverage. 79 years of unbroken partnership, forged in the rubble of World War II and sustained through the Cold War, is functionally over. American defense contractors are now locked out of 480 billion euros in procurement. Intelligence sharing is being rerouted through Ottawa. NATO is functionally split between a shrinking American sphere and a growing European-Canadian alliance. Hit subscribe because you are about to witness the moment the American defense establishment discovered that power is nothing without trust. Washington is blinded by magnitude. They treat alliances like invoices. They believe that because they are the most powerful, they are naturally indispensable. This is a systemic knowledge failure, a failure to distinguish between a commercial transaction and a strategic commitment. For 80 years, the relationship was built on a promise. That promise was absolute. It was beyond politics. It was beyond the quarterly ledger. It was the bedrock of the Western world. Then came the shift, the era of conditional security. Washington began publicly questioning the value of NATO. They threatened to withdraw. They treated mutual defense as a subscription service. They told allies that protection was contingent on financial satisfaction. If you do not pay enough, you might not get protected. Defense planners in Berlin, Paris, and London heard those words. They did what defense planners are trained to do. They planned for a future where the promise would be broken. They calculated for a world where the guarantee did not exist. They planned for a departure. The failure deepened with the weaponization of technology. Export controls were originally designed to stop enemies. Washington began applying them to friends. They used technology sharing as a lever of control. European firms were cut off from components, restricted from partnerships, subjected to conditions that treated allies like threats. Joint programs that had been underway for years stalled because the American regulator kept changing the combination to the toolshed. Collaboration became slower, more expensive, and less productive than building independently. European industry received the message. American partnership was no longer a benefit. It was a chain, but the final proof was Canada. Europe watched what Washington did to its closest neighbor, the country most integrated with the American economy, the country most aligned with American values, most embedded in the security architecture. If Washington would impose punitive tariffs on Canada, if they would attempt to coerce the transfer of sovereign territory, if they would weaponize every dimension of the relationship against a partner of 150 years, then no alliance was safe. Canada became the demonstration, not the cause, the proof. The evidence that American partnership had become transactional, coercive, and volatile. European leaders did not make their choice out of anger. They made it out of arithmetic. They calculated the probability that the United States would honor its defense commitments over the next 20 years. The number they arrived at was 0. Washington assumed the cost of switching was too high. They believed Europe had no choice. They forgot that trust is the load-bearing wall of an alliance. Power without reliability is not strength, it is a risk. And in the world of national defense, no nation builds its future on a risk. Washington taught its allies how to survive without them. Now, they are watching them do exactly that. The Atlantic-Arctic Defense Compact is not a contract, it is a new operating system, a parallel architecture designed to function without a single American component. This is the first pillar. Joint defense manufacturing. European and Canadian firms are no longer purchasing American platforms, they are co-producing their own. Fighter systems, naval vessels, autonomous drone networks, advanced missile defense. This is an integrated supply chain that bypasses the United States entirely. Production facilities are being built in Ontario and Quebec, in France and Germany, in Sweden and Poland. This creates a mutual industrial dependency. It ensures that the manufacturing base cannot be disrupted by outside export restrictions, by political shifts, by administrative coercion. They are building a defense economy that is closed to Washington. Every sensor, every chip, every line of code is indigenous to the compact. There is no American backdoor. There is no external kill switch. There is no regulatory tether to a partner they no longer trust. Systems, once built, have their own gravity. They create their own standards. They define their own future. And that future is now operational. The second pillar is the mineral shield. Europe chose Canada for a reason that cannot be replicated. It is a combination of strategic geology and political stability, critical mineral supply chains, nickel, cobalt, lithium, the materials required for modern sensors, for advanced missiles, for the entire digital defense economy. These are the inputs without which modern weapons cannot function, without which electronics cannot communicate, without which defense manufacturing stops. Washington has the power, but Canada has the resources. Europe's greatest vulnerability was dependence on volatile external sources. This agreement removes that risk. It secures long-term, guaranteed access to Canadian rare earth minerals through binding supply treaties, through joint investment, through sovereign logistics corridors. This frees Europe from dependence on Chinese and American sources simultaneously. Canada's resilience, proven under extreme economic pressure, is the guarantee Europe needed. A partner who stood firm against Washington will stand firm for the supply chain. This is not a purchase agreement, it is a strategic insurance policy. The shield is physical, the minerals are secure, the alliance is grounded in the earth itself. The third pillar is the intelligence divergence, a dedicated European-Canadian intelligence framework. It is not a replacement for Five Eyes, it is a parallel channel, a pathway that gives Europe a primary intelligence partner that is not the United States. Sensitive material, strategic assessments, signals intelligence, cyber threat analysis, all of it now flows through a corridor that Washington cannot access. They cannot monitor it. They cannot leverage it. They are being structurally excluded from the very secrets they once managed. For 3 generations, the flow of intelligence was the glue of the Atlantic relationship. Washington was the center, the filter, the gatekeeper. That monopoly is gone. European intelligence officials are making the shift in real time. For the most sensitive assessments, the ones they used to share with the CIA first, Ottawa is now the first call. This is not out of spite. It is out of trust. It is the result of an arithmetic that concluded American systems are no longer secure from American politics. The blind spots are growing. The divergent assessments are hardening. When the intelligence flows through a different door, the policy follows. Washington is losing more than secrets. It is losing the ability to define the reality of its allies. The divergence is absolute. The architecture of trust has moved, and Washington is on the outside looking in. Enter the philosophy of Warren Buffett, the ultimate auditor of value. The man who has spent 70 years studying the structure of dominance. Buffett has watched the same pattern destroy the most powerful companies in history. It is a failure of vision, a failure of humility, a failure to understand the difference between being big and being necessary. There are 2 things that win long-term partnerships in business: power and reliability. Power gets you the first contract. Power gets you the meeting, power gets you the signature, but reliability gets you every contract after that. Reliability is what makes the partnership permanent. The moment you confuse being powerful with being indispensable, you have already lost, because partners always have a choice, they just haven't exercised it yet. He applied this directly to the American defense establishment. For 80 years, the United States was the dominant supplier. It was the most powerful defense partner in the world and the most reliable. That combination was unbeatable. No country could match the capability. No country doubted the commitment. Then, over the course of a few years, the United States kept the power but abandoned the reliability. It questioned alliances, it threatened withdrawal, it weaponized the partnership, it treated allies like subordinates. Washington believed that reliability was a luxury they could afford to lose. They believed their size meant Europe had no alternative. They assumed the switching costs were too high. This is the dominant supplier's trap. I have seen this destroy companies 100 times. A dominant supplier assumes the client is trapped, so they raise the price. They add conditions. They make the partnership difficult. They become unpredictable. The client absorbs the friction for a while because the relationship is deep. There is no alternative. Until one day there is. Someone shows up who is smaller, less powerful, but more reliable, more consistent, easier to work with, and the client does the math. Not the math of capability, the math of trust, and they make the switch. The dominant supplier wakes up one morning and the client is gone. Not angry, not negotiating, gone. That is what just happened to the United States. Europe was the client, Canada was the reliable alternative, and America was the dominant supplier who assumed dominance meant permanence. Buffett is absolute on the concept of switching costs. The people who think this can be fixed by the next administration do not understand how systems work. When a client leaves a dominant supplier for a reliable alternative, they almost never come back. They have already paid the switching cost. The new supply chains are built. The new manufacturing facilities are integrated. The new intelligence pathways are functioning. The new research programs are years into development with a different partner. To go back to Washington would mean absorbing that massive cost a second time. It would mean disrupting every defense program currently in development. It would mean abandoning a partner that has proven it is reliable in favor of one that has proven it is not. No rational actor makes that choice. The switching cost has been paid. It is a sunk cost now. The new partner is delivering. The manufacturing is operational. The trust is being built in steel and concrete. Buffett's closing line is quiet and final. America did not lose this deal because Canada was bigger. It lost because America became unreliable. And unreliable is the one thing that power cannot fix. Trust, once broken at the institutional level, does not repair on a human timeline. I have watched the most powerful company in an industry lose its most important client to a smaller, steadier competitor. And I have never, not once in 70 years, seen the client come back. Never. Because you can counter an attack, you can match a sanction, but you cannot force someone to need you after they have found someone else. The setting was the European Council chamber in Brussels. Every leader of the signatory nations was present. The flags were arranged in a semicircle. The formality was deliberate. It was designed to convey permanence, weight, institutional gravity. Mark Carney stood at the podium. His tone was warm, not triumphant, not defiant, warm. The warmth of a partner who understands that this is the beginning of something built to last. He spoke of shared values, democracy, sovereignty, mutual respect. He spoke of the principle that alliances should make every member stronger, rather than making smaller members subordinate to larger ones. He spoke of the defense workers, the engineers, the soldiers. He spoke of the Arctic and the minerals. He did not mention the United States, not once, not a reference, not an allusion, not even a glance in that direction. The entire speech treated American absence as simply a fact of the new landscape, not worth commenting on, not worth acknowledging. The silence was total, and it was the loudest thing in the room. Then, during the press conference, a reporter asked the question, "What would you say to Washington about being excluded from this partnership?" Carney paused. The room went still. He did not answer with anger. He did not answer with the cold analytical precision of a confrontation. He answered with something simpler, quieter, final. We showed up every time. The room held its breath. Then the applause began. It was the respectful acknowledgement of something true. We honored our commitments when others did not. We kept our promises when others broke theirs. We were there for the meetings, the deployments, the difficult moments when showing up was expensive and inconvenient and thankless. We showed up every time. That is why we are sitting at this table, and that is why there is an empty chair where someone else used to sit. Trump told allies they could not depend on America. They finally believed him. He treated alliances as transactions. Now the transaction is complete, and America is not in it. He wanted allies to respect American power. Instead, he taught them to survive without it. He gave Mark Carney the 5 words that will be inscribed in the foundation of a new defense order. 5 words that contain no anger and no triumph. Only the quiet, factual, undeniable truth. We showed up every time. The following broadcast is a strategic projection and analytical commentary based on current economic and geopolitical infrastructure dynamics. It does not depict real-time events and is intended strictly for educational and investment analysis purposes.